School with Guitar Center. This is in our series of meet and greets with some of the musicians we know and love and have our whole lives, and great guys, and obviously none goes back further and has more chutzpah than this man over here on my left, Mr. Jim Messina. Jim, welcome to Sacramento.
How's everybody?
You are our crowd here today. That's Rhonda at the end.
Hi, Rhonda.
Gordon's the guy with the Fender t-shirt, I remember that, and Sue, of course, over here, and Brian at the end, and his lovely lady, and that's pretty much it. So this is your opportunity. I know they're all your fans. They go back years just like I do. So any questions you want to pop out, go right ahead.
Okay.
Jim Messina.
Okay, Jim, I'll start if you don't mind. Actually, mine's a two-part question, but before I ask the questions, I do want to take this opportunity to thank you for delivering.
Oh, thank you.
Because honestly, that album, I was thinking about this the other day. I was a senior in high school. I'm going to date everybody here. Whoever knows that album. But I was a senior in high school, and my sister and I would get up every morning. She was a hairdresser or something, and but the Delivered album came out, and I found that we were listening to it quite regularly. And the neat thing about Delivering was that it was such an upbeat album that literally it helped me get through my senior year, because I walked out the door and I felt really good. It was just a great album. So I
Well, it's a
appreciate
strange
that.
time because her husband was in Vietnam at the time, his sister's husband, and so, it was just a very inspirational, motivating, lively. We just listened to it the other night, because we knew it were coming, so we just wanted to hear it again. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's that album actually.
It's interesting you say that, because that album was the last album I was making with Poco. And I was ready to move on with my life, and yet I knew I had a responsibility to get that album finished. And even though there could have been some bad feelings, I chose to just lean in other directions, get the album done. And I was very proud of that album when we finished, but I was also out the door. And it wasn't until we did the Poco reunion in 1979, does that sound right? 1979, or 89, excuse me, 1989, that we went back to Columbia and pulled all that music out and listened to it. And I was quite surprised that it was as good as it was, to be honest.
Well,
So I think we both have had I had one of your moments of hearing it for the first time, and but after 25 years or whatever it was. But yes, it was a good album, and I think Rusty and the gang did a great job on that.
Oh, it was fabulous.
thing.
And so actually my questions are, number one, because that was a whole new thing, because you got to remember in those days, it was listening to Led Zeppelin and all this kind of stuff. It was my first experience with the country rock format. And so I was really taken back with it. Your playing really caught my attention because it was very, it was like country with a bite or something. I was very impressed. And so my question is, number one, who were your influences to put you into that genre of music?
Well, let's see. My influences as a kid, my father was into Western swing, Spade Cooley and what was the Texas Playboys? What was his
Bob
name?
Wills.
Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. And so, of course, my mother, on the other hand, was into rock and roll. So Elvis Presley was at home, Scotty Moore, and later Ricky Nelson with James Burton, and so a lot of that stuff was floating around. And my personal interests were starting to float toward Freddie King, who slipped immediately out into the Ventures, and then the Torquays, and the guitar bands at the time. And then suddenly, when I'm old enough to play music, I was 13 going into high school, and I had a band going into high school. So the music that was happening in those days is what we were playing. I'm trying to think. We were doing Walk Don't Run, and of course Perfidia, that was the second one, and then I had to buy the album to figure out what else they were doing, and Dick Dale, Deltone. So as I was growing up and my peers were listening to music, that's what we ended up playing. But to answer your question, probably Scotty Moore and James Burton were my greatest influences, and I had a chance a couple of weeks ago to do the James Burton Festival in Shreveport, where we raised money for kids to buy guitars to give to kids who can't afford them for our music programs. And so James and I got to play, and over the years we have become close friends out of the fact that I admired him so much, and then when I started having success, he started admiring what I was doing because he could kind of hear his influences. They were similar. So as a sidetrack, I remember in 1989 I wrote a song called Blacktop Cowboy, which I've recently changed to Blacktop Cowgirl, which I'll perform tonight. Only because times have changed and the biker chicks get no credit these days. You should have a little something now and then, right? So anyway, I brought James to come in and play Telecaster. He refused to do it. He said, "I'll play dobro, you play Telecaster." So we did this song with the two of us, and it came out pretty cool. Very, very pleased with it. But I would say those were my biggest influences growing up. And as time went on, I started to appreciate guitar players like Larry Carlton, who I think is just a fabulous guitarist. And it's hard to mention others. I mean, Stevie Ray Vaughan is certainly someone who I admire. But I also know that we grew up at the same time and we listened to the same people, the Dick Dales and I guess B.B. King was a big one for him. So I can hear all these influences in his music. And at the time, I wasn't impressed with Stevie because I didn't hear his voice. I heard his interpretation. It wasn't until years later, and unfortunately after he had passed on, that I began to really appreciate what he was doing. And today, I have a garage that cars are not allowed into. It's just welding equipment on one side and woodworking on the other. So, Stevie's in the turntable. But there's about 3 albums in there, and I just let it go on because I enjoy working, hearing the music.
One other part of the question, and that is, I was just curious, how did you get into producing so young in your life? Like Buffalo Springfield and, of course, the polka stuff.
Well, when I was in high school, my first album I did when I was 15. And that was an album that was actually supposed to be a soundtrack for a movie that of course, everybody cons people. So at 15 or 14, I was easy to con. So the guy was making a record for Audio Fidelity, and I thought the movie was called The Dragsters, and it ended up that he was making an album called The Dragsters and had all this racing engines and stuff that they threw over my music, which really was a bummer.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was about 15, and I was in LA making that record. Somehow somebody, and his name was Glenn Edwards, was a DJ at a radio station of all places, heard me do something somewhere and got in contact with my parents and asked if he could use me to produce some records on a label called Ibis, which was one of his own. And they gave me permission to do it. So in my senior year, I was actually going down working for this record company. And that's when I met Mike DeRoe, who was an upcoming engineer working for Emperor Hudson, Bob Hudson at KRLA. They had a studio called Emperor Productions where we produced these records. And of course, Mike DeRoe went on to become a multimillionaire. Every radio station in the country has either his compressors or his meters. So that's where I got my start in producing, but it was also at the point in time where I would begin the next year getting my education, working under him as an understudy in recording engineering. So that was about 15, 16 years old, something like that.
Very cool. Thank you, Jen.
I can be next. You can go down the row. And I'm going to ask a song about songwriting, a question about songwriting. When you were by your solo career, when you were logging Messina, you always had such wonderful musical, I guess they're called interludes. Like one is in Magic of Love, and then one of my favorites is Be Free. And when they go into that musical interlude, it actually, I guess it's the mandolin, that you start out with the mandolin, and it sounds Greek, and then you go into Irish, and then you blend that, And then you had almost like, almost American Indian or East Indian, and that was Magic of Love. And then when you were with, Lockets in Messina, I think it was Jumping New Holiday, you have that going on, the Caribbean thing. I mean, that's such a wonderful variety. I mean, that's always kind of filtered through all of your songs, and I was just wondering, when you're writing the formula of your songs, did that just pop into your head? Or I totally enjoy it. It's like totally out of the box. I mean, I don't think there was another guy or group that did that. Where does that come up from in your songs? How do you get that into your song?
That's a good question. And I've often thought about your question, especially about Be Free, and I've gone back in my memory banks and sort of been present as I was doing this. And I think it stems from having worked back in the Springfield, where we would perform, and there would be other groups like the Strawberry Alarm Clock or something performing, and I always thought they sucked because they were out of tune, and the music just seemed to be so chaotic. But yet I'd see the audience sort of going in that direction, and I thought, well, maybe that's part of it, is to kind of stir up the brainwaves. But that's never been my personal taste, whether it's right or wrong or indifferent. And that's the beauty of art. You can dip your fingers in paint and smear it on a canvas and frame it, and people will pay millions of dollars for it. Or you can sit there meticulously with two bristles on a brush and draw the Mona Lisa. They're both fine, they're both art. But for me, what I was encouraged to try to do something different. So when we got into Poco, that was the place where I thought, the first one of those I think came out in El Tanto de Nadie, Nobody's Fool. And I wanted us to be able to not only do the songs, but also to show our musical experiences and our ability as musicians and as instrumentalists. So that was the first time it happened, and that was a 27-minute interlude. And in those days,
we have that one. Okay.
In those days, you only had 30 minutes at the most to put on the side of an album.
Oh.
So I had to edit 10 minutes out of that. And that's where I began, and thank God I had some engineering skills because I learned how to edit when Mike and I were doing Dick Clark's Hollywood Hotline, and he'd be saying something, and then she says her and you get to the point where you got pretty good with a razor blade. So I studied the piece, and I would start editing it about every 8 bars. I'd cut out 2 here and 2 there, so that as we sped up or slowed down, over a period of time it would do this, and in this case it would kind of fall into something, and then I'd find the right pieces and edit this in, and then I'd make a movement. Got 10 minutes out of it. So that allowed us to have a couple more songs. But then later on, as I got into Loggins and Messina, I really handpicked musicians that I thought were not only really good performing artists, but they were also great musicians, like John Clark and Al Garth and Michael Mardian, who never really toured with us, but rehearsed and recorded with us.
Who's that fiddle player?
Al Garth. Yeah, and so here are some great musicians who they were like having racehorses that you needed to, occasionally loosen the bit on and let them go. So the arrangements were designed to be able to have a place in the song where we could go and let go. There was always a cue in and a cue out, and we always knew what that was. And once the cue was there, they were on their own. And then they always brought us back.
That was part of his other question.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I always wondered, especially say it's a song that you have personally written. And I know for myself, if I write a song, I have a vision of what I want to hear. So when you're working with other musicians, say a flute player as an example, you maybe already have something in your mind as to what you're thinking it's going to sound like. So my question is, do you just give him total artistic freedom and say, we're working out the key of so-and-so, and it's, 8 bars or whatever? And
yes, within boundaries. I mean, you just can't you can't let the animal go without some kind of tether on it. So, and the tether is basically the cue, musical cues in and out. Like for instance, on the Angry Eyes, you got that da 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 da. Everybody's playing. That's all as an ensemble. Da 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 da. And we go into 4 against 3. Well, there's where you better know how to play because that's a difficult thing to do. But once it falls out of that, that's really an intro into, in this case, Steve Nieve's playing his horn solo. But then he'll play up to a da 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 da. Da, da, and then they go da, da, and that's my cue to start another piece that then begins my solo. And we all know what's coming down the line, and we all know what's going down the line. So, and in between, we don't know where we stop or start, and that's the freedom that a musician should have, you know. And tonight you'll see something that I only saw the other night for the first time with the horn players, and I was blown away. And hopefully they'll do something similar tonight. So that's part of the fun. You know, it's one thing to write a song, to arrange it, to record it, to sing it, hopefully have a bestseller. But it's quite another thing to be able to go night after night and be able to look forward to doing something special that you don't do every night.
Sure.
Within guidelines.
Almost a little bit of improvising.
I think the word is improvising, yeah.
Yeah. Carefully.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
couple things. One, I'd like to start out with thank you for beginning me with joy going to rock concerts. The first one I ever went to was back in Orlando, and I don't know when, but it was Strawberry Alarm Clock, which you just mentioned.
Well,
The Springfield,
was
and
that the
Beach
night
Boys.
they stopped the concert in the middle of it, or not?
I don't know. Gosh, it was so long ago.
Well, then probably wasn't the same night.
Well, I know that one thing that Strawberry Alarm Clock went first, and they were awful. And I'm going, oh, is this what it sounds like? And Springfield came on, and I was feeling much better about things by then.
Well, I guess both of us were on the same no drug that night.
I was like 13 or whatever. But my question, I guess, would be about songwriting. I haven't written too many songs. I've been dabbling at it, and I've kind of approached it both ways. But when you sit down to write a song, you think music first, you think lyrics first. How does that all process work for you? I mean,
I think it's all of the above. Ideas really come from the right side of your brain, perceptual, conceptual part, which we also associate with our emotional being. So, I mean, I think a song comes from an emotional place, and in my workshops I talk about what that is and how it, it transfers to the audience. I'm a great believer that in the paradigm that I go from is that in the center of your core as a person is your emotional state or your emotional being, and then the next ring, like the rings of Saturn, we'll say like. If you look at the rings around Saturn, the Saturn would be the emotional core. Okay, the next ring that would go around it would be your emotional state, and the next state that exists after that is where you begin to go between your left brain and your right brain. The right brain will put pictures and images associated with your feelings and your emotions, and your left brain will start to put words that are associated with it. And then the last state of awareness is that place where your verbal state, where you communicate either in notes and phrases as a player, or in words and melodies as a vocalist. So they're very, very interconnected, but they're very, very separate. So where you get your inspiration from is where you get it from. If you have a bad breakup with a girlfriend or something and it puts you into a state, an emotional state, you're going to have some thoughts about that, and you're going to have some feelings about it, and you're going to document it in some way, shape, or form. And if you can document that at the same time and create a song that has words and feelings and emotions attached to it, and be lucky enough to find a chord progression that you haven't ripped off from somebody,
Yeah, right.
you got to copyright it. And you know, when I do my workshop, I sometimes have some very interesting people that attend it. Many of which is in the world of psychology, psychologists and therapists and stuff. Not too many attorneys. One guy showed up for about a week and then he split. But you know, one of the things that when I was putting my thesis together was I took it to George and Judith Brown, who happened to be the head of the psych department in UCSB, and I wanted to get, you know, some feedback. And long story short, they said, you know, this is good stuff. It's a great way for people to, you know, to get in touch with themselves. And he says, and actually, you know, it's a great way because they walk away with something other than, you know, a check stub that they wrote out a check. They actually, if they finish it, walk away with a copyright that actually has some value to it. So when you think about, you know, songs, they are expressions of your internal emotional being. And even if they never come to fruition in terms of being a complete song or a copyrightable piece of work, they have done their job to help you start to think and express yourself. And I have songs that I've had laying around for maybe 20, 25 years that I never finished, and suddenly one day I emotionally got to the point in my life where I was aware enough to figure out what it was I was trying to say back then, and was able to complete it. So, you know, don't ever throw something away. Just kind of keep it, and you may find out it's a diamond in the rough at some point in time. Any other questions, thoughts?
When you're writing a song, let's say you have, how much of the song do you complete? Do you complete the whole song all at once? I mean, it probably varies depending on the song. And what do you do when you get part of the song completed? And how do you go about completing it? I mean, it could be collaboration.
Well, I think I addressed a little bit of that. Sometimes they sit around for a long time. Depending on whether I need to finish it, meaning do I have a contract obligation that has to be fulfilled in a certain period of time, or I go to Folsom Prison? Or if that's the case, I'll probably find somebody who I can collaborate with, you know, to finish it. Or I've had songs that were real close, like Angry Eyes was real close, and Kenny and I had just started working, and he hadn't, you know, back in 1970, he was more of a folk song singer and writer. He was not really doing rock and roll. So we needed that song to get him, you know, to get him going. And in the process of us finally deciding to, you know, have it be Jimmy Messina sitting in, I said, why don't you take this song, help me finish it. That'll be good. You can use it in your set. And Your Mama Don't Dance was like that. And it just needed a little help. And we sat down one day and finished it. And so sometimes it's very good. I mean, you can hang on to something and it never comes to fruition and has no value. Or you could have 90% of it finished and go to somebody and say, look, I'll give you half of this if you'll help me finish it. And suddenly, you know, it's a standard. So you have to sometimes just go with the flow.
That song, Angry Eyes, comes up a lot. It came up yesterday in the interview with Tom Nakashima at the radio station.
Right.
When he asked you what was the inspiration, why did you write this, I just sat in the chair and waited for a long explanation, because it just seems like a long and complex little journey that the song will take it. And you were pretty much like, well, no, it was this, and she was angry, you know. And I went to the South, and they kind of seemed angry, and that was pretty much it. And I thought, wow, to be able just to tap into that primal emotion, anger, and write this opus around it, this highly polished, finished thing where you let the musicians go off on their own thing, whatever, has always personally amazed me how artists can do that. You know, everybody, I've talked to Bob Seger, other guys who it's the same thing. How do you tap into something personal like that, whether it's real profound or something just, hey, she was pissed, you know, and you know, you come up with this thing. I guess
Well, it's so individual, and it's you know, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and we look at, you know, surrealistic impressions, whether they're clouds or, you know, something on the wall, and I'll go, wow, look, there's a cloud there. And she'll go, no, it's a monkey. See a monkey? It's got 2 eyes and a mouth and a nose. It's a monkey. And I'll go, yeah, you're right.
What was I thinking?
It's wallpaper. People will hear different things in the music. In fact, I just learned something now hearing him talk. I thought, actually, the music to Angry Eyes works really good with Angry Eyes because there's time when the sax players are just blowing in, and you know, because there's anger, right? I mean, you can interpret it with that. For him, it's joy. You know, it's excitement. So you've got all these different things that can happen. For instance, I wrote a song called Lahaina. And I was with my wife, and we were having dinner in Lahaina, this really neat little restaurant, very crude restaurant. And I had some flip-flops on like this, and all of a sudden, something went across my feet. And it was a centipede. I mean, it scared the living out of me, you know? And that was an inspiration for a song. And so there was a line that went, well, the chorus goes, in Lahaina the living, let's see, what is the verse? The sugar cane grow, in Lahaina the living is slow, in Lahaina the mangles are sweet, but the centipede crawls all over your feet, right? Well, little did I know that when the Hawaiians heard the song, they didn't think I was talking about centipedes. They thought I was talking about tourists and how they're all over their feet. So they created their own metaphor for it, which made it popular. I didn't think about that. That wasn't what I was thinking about at all. So I think it's better unless you have, you know, an exact situation that has occurred. I mean, Neil Young wrote about Ohio. What was the name of that song? Ohio. And, you know, he was specifically talking about a situation that occurred there. So people could look at that and relate to it, and that's what it was about. I was writing about some poisonous insect who walked across my feet, and they made it into something. So I don't think you always need to worry about that. And then maybe you can take and look at art as make it for yourself, and make sure you're not saying anything that you will regret at some point in time, or you know what I'm saying. Make sure you're going to like it because it will be around for a long time if it's a success. Your Mama Don't Dance has been around for a long time, and that was not one of my favorite songs. You know, I would much rather Angry Eyes be the hit that Your Mama Don't Dance is.
But that Mama Don't Dance is perfect because that's like the first duet my 3 or 4-year-old daughter sang with her father, and
they wouldn't have sang Angry Eyes.
No.
they wouldn't have sang Angry Eyes.
They would have messed up that whole middle part.
just screwed everything.
Well, you know, and we try to instill, because the son is a drummer now and he's in a band. I'm going, what are you guys going to listen to when you're 50 years old? You know, you got to come up, hear music. Yeah, you know, about the bad people, and I can't even say the words they say in these songs. And you know, your guys' music is we've tried to instill everything in our kids, but I'm hoping. I mean, who do you listen to? Who do you find inspirational these days as far as music? Your
I listen
contemporary.
to stuff like flamenco music and, you know, musicians who are successful in other countries. I'm really not into, as a lifestyle, pop music that, well, it's not really pop music, it's
Well, we listen to like Derek Trucks and stuff. I mean, you know, in this day and age, who can you like show these young people who they need to listen to other than something?
well, you can't show them or tell them. You can only present it to them.
Turn them on to it.
You know, it's like, you know, putting spring water in front of them instead of carbonated,
Yeah.
and hope that they will drink from it. Because if you don't, you'll get the situation, your mama don't dance, your daddy don't rock and roll, you're just not cool.
So was that a formula song for you? Is that one of your, what would they call a formula song?
You could call it that, but that's, as I said, just write it and let it be what it's gonna be.
So you didn't have any prior intent when you wrote it, as far as,
No, in fact, the song starts off with the chorus, because that's all I had. You want me to dance? You know, you don't want to.
It's immediately infectious, though. It's got that thing where, you know, a bar into the music and you're like there, you know.
I don't know what that is. I mean,
It's just, you hit a chord.
I can tell you that as I look back now at 60 years of age, the one thing that is consistent and why I think acts like Eric Clapton and Bonnie Raitt work is they've stuck with a very traditional blues as the basis for which they put everything on. And that's something that every American can understand. And they do it well. I think that Your Mama Don't Dance is a basic country, rockabilly, blues is what it is. I mean, any artist you look in the 50s, whether it's Elvis Presley or Jerry Lee Lewis, they all had that sort of lick in some way, shape, or form attached to it. So it must have been the familiar that brought you to it, but it was the lyrics that made it now, you know. So, and that certainly wasn't going on in my head. It was just part of the influences that had brought that out. You know.
All right, anybody else before we break up our,
I
go ahead,
feel like
Ron.
the baby here. Anyway, I remember listening to that song, and my father was into country and my mother was into rock and roll, and they didn't get along. So,
Well, you know, and hang on to your thought, that's an interesting comment because when we did country rock, the rock stations wouldn't play it because it was too country, and the country stations wouldn't play it because it was too rock. So the two formats did not get along. And that's probably why your parents didn't get along.
yeah,
Just kidding.
but anyway, I would like to know how much influence Ahmet Ertegun had on your career.
Well, Ahmet Ertegun, I have to say, had a lot of influence, more than I realized at the time, because it was Ahmet who called me up and said, would you be willing to produce the Buffalo Springfield? And I said, well, why? They said, well, you're the only one they trust. And they don't want to work with anybody else. And would you be willing to do it? And I said, well, of course. You know, it was about a great opportunity. So I'd have to say that his phone call and my opportunity to produce that group is what led me to being able to have the career that I have had. And same with Clive Davis.
Your husband, I guess his parents were actors, and Ahmet would go and pick him up and let him take him to the shows. His mom was like, hey, you're going to this show. And he knew them very well. And I've heard a lot of stories. That's why I say I feel like the baby here, about 12 years young.
Well, I don't know, didn't know him well. When I first came to New York to try to finish that Buffalo Springfield album, I had asked Ahmet if he would bring everybody in, because I just couldn't keep them together in one space. So we came, and then I needed some help because then I couldn't get him to stay in the studio. So it was Messina Ertegun who actually got the musicians together for me to finish some of that record in New York, like Kind Woman. We had to use some studio players on that. And maybe one other, I can't remember what it was, but...
On the way home, maybe?
No, that was done in LA. But, I know what it was. It was Carefree Country Day. Because those all had string basses on that, and that was his name? Dick Davis, I think his name was. And but I was also interesting as a sideline, Nora Jones, I think Messui produced her first album.
Is that right?
And if you listen to it, just the instrumentation, and if you go back and listen to Kind Woman or Carefree Country Day, it has the same ambience to it.
Okay.
So there is a very stylistic producer pulling the things he likes together with an artist, and it happened to work fantastically, especially with Nora.
Wow. Okay. Well, Jim, this has been wonderful. Thank you for your time. Jim Messina.
You
Any last minute
I'm
parting
just
shots?
happy to be here.
Just did it for him.
All right, I'm just glad to be here.
As we all are.
Can I have one more question?
Yeah.
Jim, any current projects you got going on, or?
Well, let's see. I'm in the process of working on an album for myself for next year, and Kenny and I are going to go out in the fall of 2009. So we're sort of starting right now and preparing for that situation. But I'm constantly doing music. I have my own studio, so it's just a way of life for me.
Yeah.
And if there's moments where there's success, then there's success. And if there's moments where there's not, I'm still doing the same thing no matter what. And if I get bored with it, I'll build a table or a chair or weld up a front gate or do something like that.
I see.
So.
And are you gonna produce any kind of videos, like for producing production or something?
Not really.
No?
You know, I have to say that it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Trying to create music.
the last video we did was the DVD, Loggins in Messina. It was a tremendous amount of work. And it's not that I don't like to work, but, you know, from the age of 16 and 17 until I was at least 30, there was 15 years, it was night and day, and it was eating me alive, ulcers and just craziness. And I decided that, you know what, I'm going to enjoy my life, and I'll work hard when those moments come, but I'm not going to go out and try to stir up something. I mean, the last thing I need to do is to be in a studio, recording studio, with people who can't sing their songs or can't remember their parts or have to be high in order to get it done. That's just not fun to me.
It's just that when you were talking about this Rings of Saturn, I mean, I just like wrote it all down because it was so good. I mean, it would be nice of you, because, I mean, I think I really borrowed your opinion, have that, you know, either in a videotape or a DVD.
That was self-help deal, I guess, Jim.
Yeah, you know, workshop, you were talking about workshop. Oh my God, can I sign up for a workshop?
Well, there is a workshop, and right now what I've done, because I produced the workshop and I, you know, marketed it and did all that kind of stuff, and it takes another skill level to get out and market something and promote it, and then to teach it. It's too much, and I've been there before, where I've been the producer, and the engineer, and the musician, and it's too much work. And I think at some point in time, something has to break, and it's usually my insides that start to break, and trying to keep all the balls in the air. So I've actually found a couple of people who I think who are going to work on promoting that. And one is more of a real high-end type workshop, which is fine, but I think that the workshop works best when it's done really with you know, people of more modest means. So I'm working on trying to get something that we can get together, maybe even up here in the Gold Country, whether it's the Columbia Hotel or, you know, a dude ranch up here, someplace where we can get, you know, at least 20 people. They can be fed and housed, and we can have a place to do a concert evening on a Saturday, where we spend, you know, Sunday night to about Wednesday talking about songwriting and getting those skill levels, and then from then we talk about performing and how to perform, and then at the end of it, I usually, you know, have a writers in the round evening that you perform in front of a live audience that's having dinner. So it's an intimate evening of fine dining and acoustic music, and there's where the participants get a chance to perform. Some who have never performed before, some have. But it usually is a very successful evening for the performers, because we pick your best stuff. You know, if you've got 4 songs and they're fantastic, and she's got 1, then that, you know, helps to balance it out. And if you don't have a song but you've got lyrics and they're really good, then we'll get that as a poem, and we'll fix it so that the evening has a real flow to it. And the audiences love it, but it's something I have to get some folks to organize that for me, because it's between working with Kenny and myself, and then that, it becomes too much to have to promote it too.
Okay, well, maybe you can write a song, Rings of Saturn. That sounded so good.
Be my guest.
Up to you, and you can critique it.
No, you just write it and finish it and get a hit on it and put my name down as the writer.
All right. You got a deal.
Jim, anytime your voice feels like it might be,
Yeah, I'm getting a little tired. I got real sick
he
about
is
2 weeks
performing
ago.
tonight, needs the big voice to perform.
All right.
Okay, thank you again.